to In the Bonus, the Big East women's basketball podcast, where we're talking all things. Guys, oh my goodness, you would think that we've got sunlight here. My brain's working, but no, apparently not. Hi, everybody. Another week. I'm your host, Meghan Caffrey. We've got Lisa Carlin, Chloe Marotta, and Isis Young on the pod this week. We are so excited to be coming with you guys as we are winding down the regular season of conference play. Lots of games still to play, though, and lots of important games. But before we get into all of that, let's just chat a little bit about what our weekends were like. Because, Ice, you were coming off of quite a crazy weekend. You had a crazy call yourself, huh?
Yeah, I wrapped up my ACC women's basketball package. So it was unranked Georgia Tech was at number 6 NC State, which is a top 6 team in the country. They are very deep, very good. And Georgia Tech guys on the road took them to overtime. Honestly, watching the game, they deserved to win, Lisa. Like, they deserved to win. I mean, there was shot after shot that was made, three after three that was made. The last play for Georgia Tech in regulation, they had the ball, and they're like not knowing what to do. It's 3 seconds left, and the girl heaves like a left-handed just push shot, hits the glass, goes in. They tie the game up. Game goes overtime. Like, she's not left-handed. She's not left-handed. It was ridiculous. So Kylan Mills and I had that game like literally on our feet. It was a sellout crowd too for Reynolds Coliseum and NC State. So just good. I just feel like every game for women's basketball, like that's now supposed to be put on national games and get the recognition it's getting. And so we're just seeing really good basketball across the landscape. And then, that was my easy trip. My next trip is a men's basketball game at New Mexico State. I go all the way to El Paso, Texas. Ooh. Then I have an hour drive to Las Cruces, which wherever that is basically on the border of Mexico and New Mexico. So a lot of traveling this week. We're going far.
Congratulations, though. That's very fun, very exciting. All of the good things. And you know what else is pretty fun and pretty exciting? Chloe Marotta, who we're joined with this week. We're pumped. Our girl, Kim. Kim, we miss you. If you're watching, if you're listening, she is basically, we need to get Kim an apartment in LA at this point in time. We are so proud of you out there hosting or being part of the studio coverage for Fox. But we are pumped to have Chloe Marotta on the podcast this week. And Chloe also had her first call on the Big East Digital Network this past weekend. You were out covering Seton Hall, DePaul. I was able to see you, but welcome to the broadcast life, girl. How did it go?
Thanks. I'd love to be on In the Bonus. It's always been a fun time, one time before. So, I called my first game, which was great. It was exciting. It was, I learned a lot from it, which was important for me. So I headed to New Jersey out in Seton Hall, and they played DePaul, as you mentioned, Meg. And it was a good game, back and forth. These are two teams that just want to get downhill, right? So I made a comment during the game. I'm like, I'm looking left, right. I mean, it was transition the entire time. Seton Hall came out with the win, but it was a good first call for me. Like I said, I learned a lot. I feel like I needed to kind of just watch the game, put the notes aside, and just really dive into what was happening and analyze that a little bit more.
It's very hard to go from being a player so quickly to wearing the headset and being in the booth, because you have this mindset of, okay, what is the coach is talking about? What would I be doing as a player? Which is exactly the mindset you want to have as an analyst. So I am so happy that you've made this transition, Chloe. You seem to be doing it very seamlessly too. So kudos to you. You just mentioned so many times that you learned so many things. What was like maybe the hardest thing about you to call this game?
Yeah. So, I mean, okay. So I know these teams, right? And I've played against these players before. And so I had all these stats written down. I'm like, okay, they're from this person and they average this and they're Big East Player of the Week. And you're looking at it and I'm like, when in the world am I going to say all this stuff? And do I need to even say it? Like, I was just, there was moments I'm like, I don't even know. And so like I mentioned, kind of the hardest thing in that first quarter was just first and second quarter, like looking at my notes being like, okay. And then second quarter, I was like, I need to slide these notes aside, watch the game. The reason why I'm doing this is because I am I understand the game. So I'm like, just watch it, understand what's going on. And then it kind of started to flow a little bit more and went a little bit better. And I enjoyed it then too, because I was like, this is what I love, watching it a little bit more. And I let the play-by-play, Matt Ambrose, I let him to the stats, and Meg kind of gave me that, opinions. I'm like, this is great. And so that was interesting to learn. Also post-game, Azana Baines had a good game, and they sent her over to me right away. And they were like, Chloe, why don't you do this? I'm like, perfect, I'll do it. She comes, she sits down, 3 quick questions in my head, and I ask them to her. And then all of a sudden in my ear, they go, and just send it back whenever you have a chance. And I'm thinking, how in the world am I supposed to send it back? I had no idea what to do. I had zero clue. And so I turn and I look and I'm like, we'll send it back to you in the studio. There's no studio.
Yep.
There is no one in the studio, and the screen went black, and that was it. I was like, whatever. You know what?
Oh my gosh, that's absolutely hilarious. We've all been there. I will speak for the three of us, and Kim as well. We've all been there where someone's telling you something in your ear, and you're either like, I didn't hear you. What did you just say?
Yeah.
Or I don't know what that means. Or who am I sending this to? And you're just like, okay, we're done. And you're like, I hope that they press some buttons in the truck and make me look better, because I don't know. That is absolutely hilarious, Chloe. I think that kind of hearing you talk through how you had all these stats, and then ultimately in the second quarter, you were like, I'm getting rid of my boards. I'm going to watch the game and talk about it. That is so key. And so many people don't learn that as quickly as you did. A little insight for you, Chloe, you do so much prep. And if you use 10% of it, that's a great day, at least for me. I do so much prep, and 90% of it doesn't get used, but it's in my head and I still know it. So it allows me to tell stories a little differently, or things like that. Even if their average is usually really good and they're not shooting, you can still use that contextual knowledge while you call a game. So all the prep is not for naught. Don't worry. It's somewhere in your brain.
The cool thing is the stats aren't your big thing. We don't want to hear stats from you. We want to hear your analysis, your thoughts, your opinions, like your feelings. Matt can tell us stats. We want to hear why this stat is effective, why it's working. But those are good lessons you learned in your first broadcast, though. Great, perfect lessons. You nailed it.
Guys,
you nailed
thank
it.
you.
And also sometimes it's better. We all have had somebody in our, the first time having someone in your ear, and it is shocking. And it is, you try and process it all. And they always love to come on, especially if you're a sideline reporter, they love to come on as you are just trying to get your 20 seconds that you have to speak in. And you're like, okay, I'm not processing what you're saying, because if I listen to you, I'm now not going to speak and the camera's on me. So it's all
I stopped talking multiple times.
It happens. You'll get used to it. It happens. Yeah, it takes some adjustment.
So funny.
And that's the best thing too, as you're doing it, it's anyone can kind of throw on a headset and talk about things, and you can always tell right away, with watching games, any of our fans, by listening to the podcast, they're all basketball fans. And when someone's trying to fake being a broadcaster, right? Trying to put on a certain personality and act a certain way. And the fact that you were just I'm just trusting myself, right? That's when now people start to love you with your personality, and letting that shine through versus what a lot of us try and do in the very beginning of I have to be this, where it's no, I am who I am, and I'm going to go and crush it. So
thanks. Great advice, you guys. Thank you.
Yeah. We love it. And so let's now, speaking of talking basketball, right? Let's now do our job, ladies. Now let's start talking a little bit of basketball, because we've got some news, right, coming off of this Monday. It was, if you were off on Monday, and even if you weren't, I hope that you had the game on somewhere in the background, because we had a top 25 matchup. It was 21 Creighton taking on number 15 UCONN. This game was televised nationally, and UCONN did end up winning this game. And with the win, they secured at least a share of the Huskies' 23rd Big East basketball regular season title, which is, I mean, just a crazy stat to kind of look at right there, the dominance that the Huskies have had. Chloe, I'm interested to get a little bit of your take on this game, on the Huskies, on the Blue Jays as well.
So Creighton had a tough job because they were coming to UConn, playing at UConn, playing on this national television, but it's nothing that they can't handle. These, that starting five is a group that's played together for a very long time. And so that was kind of, the hype going into the game. And they were tied at halftime, Meg, which was actually something that I was like, okay, let's dive in, get your popcorn. Like, there's someone tied at halftime with UConn, which is phenomenal to know. And so, Creighton came out. I want to say Lauren Jensen had a great start to the game. She finished with, and I don't know exactly actually how much she finished with, but we can look that up. But, she had a great finish, high off the glass. She was playing confident, shooting threes, pull-ups, whatever it was. And that's when Creighton's at their best, is when Lauren Jensen and their top scorers are performing at that level. But UConn does UConn things, and they take over when they can. They took advantage of some of their turnovers, and they scored on the other end. Aaliyah Edwards finished with 20 points and 8 rebounds, and they had a couple other girls in double points as well. So Ashlyn Shade, their freshman, with 15 points and 9 rebounds. So that's great to see from someone like a freshman at UConn. And then Paige Beckers doing Paige Beckers things with 24 points and 6 rebounds, which is just something tough to stop. And so, these are two teams that play a lot of their starters, and they play the entire game, right? So you knew there was going to be some moment in the game where maybe Creighton was going to tire out, or maybe UConn was going to tire out. And I feel like both teams kind of took advantage of those moments. And then UConn just grabbed it at the end. And like I said, I've played UConn multiple times, and when UConn does that, they grab it from you and they take it and they run with it. And it's like, gosh dang it, you just gave it to them and you cannot get it back, because they're going to keep rolling and rolling with it. And so it was a fun game to watch. It's so good for the Big East to be at this level, and to be on national television and to have this viewership. And so congrats to UConn with that win, but Creighton's coming for some other teams in the Big East for sure.
Chloe, I'm curious, as a player who you played a ton of minutes with Marquette. We were, I feel like I was always seeing you on the court. Was there ever, did you find yourself within a game? Was there a preference of when you could kind of rest and head to the bench? Were you I want to play, halftime's perfect for me? Or is there kind of within a game little tidbits where you're I actually enjoy popping onto the bench at this point?
It's interesting because I was never the player that wanted to go out, right? So I didn't have those moments where I was I need to take a rest. But my coach knew me to the level of, I'm going to take her out because I know that she needs a rest, but she's not going to tell me. And so Coach Duffy had those moments for me. I didn't have them in my head, but there was times when, if you're going all 10 minutes in the first quarter, and I'm someone who's pretty foul prone, right? We got to get her out. She's going to get a couple fouls here. We have to get her out, get her a good rest, get someone else in the game. And so for me, that was not the case. But I know some other girls that are playing point guard or playing a different position than me, that they have those moments. They know, I need a second win at 3 minutes in the first quarter. Take me out, put me back in with a minute left, and I'm going to get rolling. So I know that players have that in their head, in that conversation with their coach, that gives them that time.
Let's turn the page a little bit. Let's go back a little bit further to this past Saturday. There was an exciting win for Butler. Butler pulled off the upset over Villanova, a really tight game with this one. And this is honestly, these are the types of games we love as we're winding down the regular season coming into the tournament, because to see these types of performances gets you so excited for what can happen once we are in tournament time. But Lisa, could you break down this Villanova Butler game a little bit for us?
Yeah, Meg, this game was absolutely crazy. Villanova, we're coming off of their second win over Marquette. And then, of course, they get the win over Georgetown. And they have to play a Butler side that, under Austin Parkinson, is really complete. And defensively, they're just getting stronger. So ultimately, Butler beats Villanova 55-52. And I chatted with Villanova head coach Denise Dillon about this game and about the season overall. And just like some background. The Big East coaches are amazing.
Mm-hmm.
They give a lot of insight to us. They're willing to talk to us. They're willing to share stories and how training was and what this game was like, and a lot of perspective that we don't get to have unless you're in those huddles and in those locker rooms. And I have had the huge pleasure of knowing Denise Dillon and covering her for a long time, because she was at Drexel in Philadelphia, where I also covered women's basketball there. And now she's at Villanova. So I've known her, not just her time in the Big East, but prior to that, which gives me, I think, just a little bit of a different relationship with her, where we feel pretty comfortable with each other. But one thing about Coach Dillon is that she's a woman of faith, and being in the Big East, like at Villanova, it's a Jesuit school. So she is allowed to flex some of those muscles. And the Serenity Prayer is one that speaks to her a lot and that she uses every day in her coaching career. The prayer goes, God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. She leans on this a lot. So when things aren't going her way or Villanova's way, for instance, in this Butler game, she leans on that prayer before, during, and after the game, especially when she starts to feel the wheels coming off, or knowing that, okay, we're not hitting our shots. We just have to get one more stop. We want to make it a 1-point game. That's what Villanova wants. We can do that. And she asks, okay, there are going to be challenges throughout this. What am I going to do? What can I do to make it better for my players? What can I do in order to do everything possible to help the players be successful and to fight this fight? Focusing on their execution, focusing on getting stopped. But really, it all comes down to her Serenity Prayer. And when she talked to me about this, I mean, isn't that so cool, guys?
I love
like,
that so
just
much.
Humans. Like, sometimes we forget that all of these people are just humans, and that's what they're doing, whether it's their job day in and day out. And in moments for bad games for her and for Villanova, because they wanted to win against Butler, and it was a close one that they didn't, which doesn't help them down the stretch, frankly. We talked about getting into March and to the tournament and what's going to happen, in Villanova being that bubble team right now in the Big East, because they're 9-5 and they're third in the standings, but they have a really tough schedule coming up. So when in those moments when things aren't going the way that Denise Dillon wants them to go and Villanova wants it, she breaks it down into just 5-minute segments. Okay, this is exactly what happened in this 5-minute segment. How do we switch it for the next 5-minute segment? Doesn't matter about the rest of the game. It doesn't matter about what happened in the first quarter. It's this 5-minute segment and the one that we just completed, and growing from there. Having this sense of, it's not our day, but what can we do to change it? Which ultimately all comes back to the Serenity Prayer. It was really cool to kind of hear her talk about this and what's working. Now, a little bit more on the X's and O's side of things. They're still hoping for more leadership on the court and other players to step up so that Lucy Olson doesn't have to lift it all herself. Of course, Zania Jones out with that concussion right now has not helped them at all. So they lose a lot of their rotation without Jones in the mix. She's a point guard. She's really comfortable and confident handling the ball. And without Jones in there, it's harder to give Lucy Olson a rest. So the rotation just gets shifted down, and it's a struggle for them without a lot of depth and a lot of players that can handle the ball as confidently as Jones and Olsen do. So the natural point guard that is Zania Jones not being in the mix with her concussion, not great for them, but Denise Dillon, of course, super hopeful and confident in her team. Another thing that she mentioned that I do want to say is that so many times coaches have mantras, what they talk about. One of Coach Dillon's is average, good, great. She talks about it individually with players as a team and saying, okay, what do you want to be? Do you want to be average? Do you want to be good? Do you want to be great? Because now as coaches, we can help you do that. And she was like, right now we're having those conversations. Do you want to be great? Because being average is picking and choosing when you're going to do great things and when you're going to be switched on. But being great is that no matter what, if it's a practice, if it's game, if it's film, every time you step on the court, you are going to be great every single day. And so that's the next level that she's hoping and trying to get to with this team. There's not much time left, but there's enough. I think that they have enough in them, and we've seen the greatness from Villanova to be able to do that. And against Butler, Parkinson and the Bulldogs got their way over the Wildcats.
Well, and I love that you mentioned, Lisa, like just the insight that the coaches in this league brought up, because our guest on the podcast this week is Butler head coach Austin Parkinson, and talk about some insight. We are so lucky to hear about these coaches and to learn a little bit more about the who, not necessarily just the do. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Austin Parkinson, tune into this interview because this one's such a treat. Check it out. Welcome into the podcast, head coach of the Butler Bulldogs, Austin Parkinson. Butler most recently coming off of a huge weekend win over Villanova, beating the Wildcats 55-52. Austin, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, excited to be in this company.
When you look at your team and this season, how do you put it into perspective? You know, March is quickly approaching. Where do you take a temperature check on your team right about now?
You know, I felt like we had a good non-conference. We were 8-3, and then we got off to a pretty slow start in conference. Maybe lost a couple games that we could have won, but kind of in the middle of that, started playing better. And we just tried to keep everybody on the mindset of like, look, like it's going to go your way. You just got to essentially treat the game the right way. And played better kind of in the middle half, and then finally broke through against St. John's, and then fortunate enough to, win the last two road games.
Your style of play that you have with this group is it's obvious. It's clear that what you want to do and how you want to execute it, and the players have bought into that. How have you been able to get the buy-in from the players?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily the buy-in, but the way you get the buy-in. It's a little tricky. I mean, I think we lack, a little bit of depth. You'd love to be in a spot, I think, probably a couple years from now, you'd be in a spot where people are earning or essentially maybe if somebody comes off the bench, they're taking a position because they've outworked or outproven somebody in the court. And oftentimes on the court, when you're trying to implement or emphasize certain things, hey, you need to probably come over here and sit for a little bit. We haven't had that kind of depth. And so it's kind of been trial by fire and really trying to learn through video and really keeping the mindset on the right things. And our kids have had a good mindset, and they've seen the big picture and what we're trying to accomplish. And, I'm also encouraged by, we've got 3 freshmen in the starting lineup right now, which, going into Big East games, that's not always probably the ideal recipe, but I'm really proud of how they're developing.
Coach, you talk about those 2 wins back-to-back on the road, Providence and Villanova, and I have my eye on your defense right now. You held St. John's to 59, you held Providence to 48, and then Villanova to 52. What have you seen out of your defense in the last 3 games that have allowed you guys to be able to win those games and keep those teams at bay?
Yeah, I mean, I think we always take a lot of pride on when you're playing a team the second time around to learn what you did or didn't do the first time. And we felt like in the games the second time around we played better. Creighton, we got hammered at their place. We were ahead at halftime against them, and then they came out and hit us with a really tough run, but still I think defended them better. And then these last 3 games, as you mentioned, I think we followed the scouting report better. Our post players have done a better job, guarding the other team's post, and then we've rebounded better. I mean, that's the other part. We had a game versus DePaul where DePaul just outcompeted us on for every loose ball, every rebound, and credit to them. At the same time, you watched on our end, it was hard to watch, and it was not an easy film session. And so, I think that was a little bit of a turning point for our team to realize, like, we got to create those extra possessions. There was a big play in the Villanova game where the shot went up, and Caroline Strand from the opposite side of the floor ran to the other corner to get the rebound, and that's a play that she wasn't making, 6 or 7 games ago, or anybody on our team wasn't making. So, those little things make a huge difference when you're trying to get those kind of wins.
Coach, I want to kind of talk about Caroline Strand and just her improvement from last year to this year. 4th time on the Big East weekly honor roll. Talk to us about, what you see in her and where she can go coming up in the season.
Yeah, really proud about her. I mean, she probably should have been Player of the Week last week, and she has stepped up in big games. She scored well all year. I think when she rebounds the ball, so she had 9 rebounds each game. When she rebounds the ball, especially on the defensive end, that allows her to kind of get our transition going. And I think for her, she's kind of had to find that balance of she became number one on the scouting report. And when you're number one on the scouting report, now they're going to start taking away certain tendencies, certain things that you like to do. And I think there was a stretch there where she felt the burden of being the leading scorer and trying to make plays for her team, but also dealing with, okay, they're taking away certain things. And I think in the last, probably 4 to 5 games, she's done a great job of adjusting and finding her spots. And I mean, she hit 2 big buckets against Providence and Villanova, big 3 late, and right after air banking one. So that tells you her confidence level and her belief in herself, and really grateful that she has that.
Coach, you've got the Butler way, right? And the way that when people look at Austin Parkinson led Butler teams, that is going to be the standard. However, every season the team takes on its own personality a little bit, their own characteristics. When you look at your group of athletes this season, what are some of the characteristics of this group of players that you have?
Well, it's a group. It's a great group to be around. They want to do well. What was interesting during the stretch where we're really struggling, sometimes I've had years where you have bad practices and then you play poorly in the game. This was kind of the opposite. I've only had it one other time in my career, but our practices were great. I mean, they were outstanding, great energy. And then things would pop up during the game that you didn't see, which was, kind of hard to adjust to. But they've been very enjoyable. I think the turning point, we talked about, you mentioned the Butler way. After that DePaul game, I just talked about the fact, I'm from Indiana. I grew up coming to Hinkle Fieldhouse and watching, semi-state games and Butler basketball games. And the one thing I always said when I watched Butler play is they were high IQ and they were tough as nails. And, I felt like that we weren't representing that Butler the way that we should and what we're capable of. And so that part of it, it's been great to see that step kind of being taken place in the last, probably 5 to 7 games, but also seeing people understand their roles a little bit. Last year's team, and even though we had a tremendous improvement, we lost our leading scorer in Rachel McLemore. Anna Mortag was our second leading scorer. She's been out for the year, and our point guard, a different point guard. So you've had all these different, pieces. There's a learning process to that. So it's been neat to see them kind of come together and start to figure some things out.
Every year and every team is different, as Meg talked about and you just described in these characteristics. But you yourself as a coach are a veteran, a successful coach that has a history of winning. But you're kind of always developing and changing how you are as a person and as a coach. How have you changed this year as a coach, or what have you learned with this group of players?
Yeah, I mean, I think the last time I was 12 years ago when I was at IUPUI, and it was very different circumstances and how we turned that program around as a staff, and very different in the approach of we couldn't shoot. We weren't the smartest basketball players on the court, but we played really hard and we were really tough. And so as we brought new players into the program, the more skill we had, the toughness was kind of already set. And here we're more skilled, but that toughness factor, taking charges, diving on the floor, and figuring out how to do that when you can't, you don't have a lot of depth. And what I mean by that is we can't just put a lid on the rim and do war rebounding for 10 minutes. We wouldn't have the bodies to be able to do it. So the group of kids that we have, especially that young group that's going to continue to evolve, I think the big thing is just sticking with the process. Even though we've won these last 3 games, it's really not been about the winning. It's just stick with what we're doing. I mean, we played Marquette. We were tied with 4 to go. They make a bucket. We miss a wide open layup. I mean, if we played them again, we'd try to get the same bucket. We just missed it. And so trying to celebrate hey, look, we're on the right track here, but let's just keep sticking with it. On a coaching standpoint, it was great to see the St. John's game go our way because these kids have been, putting that effort in and their heart into it. And they've really stuck to the process, but it hadn't gone their way. So when it did, it was great to see the reward of that.
Coach, 4 games left in the season. It almost breaks my heart to say that. 4 games left in the regular season. It's went by so fast. But you guys have Xavier, Georgetown, DePaul, and then that Marquette that you're talking about. Just what do you need from your team during the last stretch of these games to put out the best product on the floor and to play your best basketball late in February?
Yeah, I'm not sure who mentioned it, but our defense has been better. That's got to continue on. We've got to continue to rebound. I think that's been a big piece of it. But the other thing is we can't hold the ball. sometimes when I think what we run's pretty effective, but against quality opponents, that's not always going to be the case. You're not always going to be able to score out of it. So it's what do you do when the ball breaks down? And we've had a tendency at times to sometimes let the ball stick and hold the ball. Villanova was a game where in the second half the ball moved as well as it had all year. Didn't necessarily mean that we were scoring, but we were getting quality shots. So I think as we hit these last 4 games of, when things break down, making sure that the ball doesn't stick and that we're moving the basketball, because we do shoot it well. We're one of the top 3-point shooting teams. That spreads the floor, but it only spreads the floor if the ball's moving. If you're holding it, we can have those ugly quarters where it's 6 and 8 points, and we're trying to avoid that.
I want to talk about kind of the preparation going into some of these games. Playing at the Finn, at Nova is very, very difficult place to play. You have a staff that you're very familiar with, that have coached with you at IUPUI. You're from Indiana, like you said. How important is it that your staff and you have this chemistry that you can continue to build to prepare for games in the future?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, I think it's interesting in our industry. Sometimes you see coaches hire these hired guns that constantly are moving from staff to staff. And, that's an approach, that's fine. But I'm a big believer in hiring good people. And, the people I have in my program, Latrell Fleming, who played at Wisconsin, he's been with me since IUPUI for about 7 years. He's very big picture oriented. He coaches our post. Kristen Woodrich was a former head coach and then worked with me at IUPUI. And then Holly Hoopengardner, who played for me, was part of our championship teams. They're good people. It seems like every morning I walk in here, they're watching film individually with the players. And then you mentioned the preparation. I think our kids have kind of started to understand, how important like little things are in the details and possessions and what it can come down to in a late game. And so I've felt like on the road, we've actually had better preparation at times than we have at home. Sometimes you've got class, other distractions. And I know before the Creighton game, they had their own film session that was led by the players, which typically the night before we would do, on the road. And so trying to find ways at home to be able to keep that focus. But my staff does a great job and scouting and the preparation and really being high character people.
Love that. Okay, Coach, we have a game for you to play. Okay. Every guest who comes on the podcast, we have in the bonus. Usually our girl Kim Adams runs this portion. She's not with us this week. She was out in LA doing some Fox work. So we've got these questions for you. Are you ready? There's 5 questions, and they're going to be fun. Okay.
Can't wait.
Okay. We're going to softball. Make it easy for the first one. Okay, Coach. We'll start off. Your favorite place to eat in Indy?
Mama Carola's Italian restaurant. It's right down the street, and it is unbelievable.
Ooh, okay. What's our favorite follow-up? What's your favorite dish from there?
Spaghetti bolognese, Caesar. We used to go there all the time when I lived down here. I actually live about 10 minutes north, so we do a DoorDash or Total Takeout as much as we can.
I love that. Love that. Okay, next up. What is a piece of content you're consuming right now? We know you're watching a ton of film, obviously, but if you're taking a break from watching some film and getting ready for your next appointment, is there a show that you're watching? Anything along those lines?
Yeah, what show am I not watching? I just finished Criminal Record on Apple. I finished Jack Reacher.
I've heard
great. Masters of Air. That's the one my wife and I are on. She's a big World War II buff, and it comes out every Friday, and just makes you that show is unbelievable. Like that generation is incredible, and the every time you walk it away, and we watch it at night, and I'm like, I really don't sleep very well after it. So I don't know why we watch it now, but it's the only time we can get the kids down. So.
Oh, is that
like
Netflix, HBO,
Apple TV?
Apple TV.
It's World War II and the Air Force, and I mean the stuff that those guys experienced, and what a generation! I'll tell you that.
I just watched Band of Brothers.
Yes, so good.
So good, but same thing, Coach. I was watching it at night, and I would go to sleep, and they're the airborne division, and I would like have dreams of these men jumping out of planes, and it's such a great series. But I needed to switch to watching it in the morning.
Yeah, it makes us. My wife and I've said, like, man, some of the things we complain about today, it's like we need to watch that show, like with stuff they were experiencing.
Yeah.
Okay, next up, what is your favorite hobby? Something outside of basketball that you like to do?
Golf. I like to golf quite a bit. My dad lives about 10, 15 minutes, and I'm very fortunate. We get to golf, at least once or twice a week. So I joke he's got two buddies that are, we call it my ARPs, my 65 and over club, the AARP crew that I get to golf with. So it's that I'm really grateful I get to do that.
Are you winning?
I am. We had a big controversy last year on my dad moving up to the senior tees, which was a bit for his skill level didn't seem like it was necessary. But we pushed that controversy aside and we're able to move forward. But it's about 50-50 right now.
Okay.
Love that. Coach, this one is a special one for you being a coach. What is one of the most rewarding things that you have learned through coaching that you might not have expected?
The one, when I went from coaching men to women, I was really concerned how I would be able to impact their lives off the court. I was like, am I going to be able to do that, have the same impact? And what I found was absolutely the case. I feel like there are a lot of young ladies that don't have strong male figures in their life. And you see, and I've got a young lady myself, a 7-year-old, you see how important the dad's role is and daddy's girl and whatnot. And, I'm grateful for the conversations I've been able to have over the years of, about life, not necessarily basketball. One of my people on staff, Maddie Wise, she played at Iowa State, played for me my last year at IUPUI. And, we went to lunch right when she got there and talked about life. And she would tell you, she's on my staff now. We had a lot of in-depth conversations about the direction of where she's going and what she wanted to do. And so I lean on my wife. I'm really grateful. My wife, not just as a mother, but she owns her own business. And so a lot of times I'll pepper her with things. And just the fact that the both of us can have an impact on our players. And then the other part is I got a 7-year-old. So coming up to this Georgetown trip in a week, my daughter's going with us, and my staff's already got a little spa night planned for her. And she gets to come to Hinkle all the time. She thinks she owns the place, but being there interacts with the players and her is a special deal.
That's so special. We love that. And finally, Coach, this one is a little different. So with players, what we have been asking is 3-on-3 for them to pick their teammates that they would like to play on with. However, we'll ask you if you could have a staff that you would kind of like to build out. Any other coaches, men's, women's, pro, whatever you would like. If you wanted to pick a couple of assistants for that, who else would you like to have on your coaching staff?
You're in like the 3v3 world championships. So this is like real deal. You can choose anybody you want. There's no one that can say no to you to be on your staff.
Let's go 3 coaches. I'm going to pick Flan from Creighton. I'm going to pick Matt Painter and Purdue. And just because I know he will tell me whatever comes to his head, and he has a plethora of knowledge, and the old mentoring role, Harry Peretta.
Oh, love that. We love Harry.
That's a
Tell
good
exactly
one.
what he thinks. So I need to hear that sometimes.
That's going to be a very good offensive team that you have boiling there.
If I could add one more, I always liked Amy Williams, Nebraska. We were at the Summit League. We always had great battles. I loved the things that they ran and kind of how she saw the game. So she'd be another one that would be enjoyable.
Oh, I like that.
Awesome. Coach, that's money to success or keys to success right there. We love that. There you go. All done within the bonus. Thank you, Coach. This was such a treat. We so enjoyed this conversation. Best of luck the rest of the way. Butler heads to Xavier coming up next. Their game against the Musketeers is this Wednesday night when In the Bonus drops at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time, airing on FS2. So be sure to tune in to the Bulldogs then. Head coach Austin Parkinson, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
It's always so fun to do the In the Bonus rapid fire with coaches, with just like the little switch up that we're able to get with them. Big golfer, so that's good to know with Coach Parkinson. We like to golf. But right now we're concentrating on some more hoops because it's not golf season quite yet for all of us. So let's chat about some of the games that we're looking forward to this weekend. Ice, we'll start with you because you're back on the call for another Big East game. Whoop, whoop. You're headed out to Queens on Saturday. Is that correct? For some Providence St. John's action?
Your girl is also stepping in the play-by-play chair. So bear with me. For those that are listening, bear with me. If I don't sound as technical as they normally do, it's because I'm not, and it's going to be great. But I'm excited for this matchup. These two teams faced each other just about 3 weeks ago. St. John's got the win over Providence, 55-48. Unique Drake had a fantastic game. She had 24 points. She was 10 of 20 from the field, 50%. And then, though, the difference in this game I am banking on will be Gracie Fosa. Gracie Fosa did not play in this game for Providence. She was hurt during that time. So Bryn Farrell led their team in scoring with 18 points. But I think having Gracie Fosa back in the starting lineup, the way that she's been competing for the Friars and scoring the basketball, St. John's will have to worry about just another offensive weapon. And so really excited to see how they handle that. Also, obviously, by this time, it'll be Wednesday. And so St. John's will have played a game against Georgetown, in which they also played about 3 weeks ago, and they only beat them by 1. That was a tight game. So St. John's is a tough week. It's so weird sometimes how the scheduling goes for certain teams in February. I feel like certain teams kind of have an easier schedule in terms of maybe playing more at home. But St. John's has a lot of these games left that they're going to have to pull out, and they were close games the first time around. But yeah, I've got my eye on this one. It's on Saturday at 2:00.
Nice. Before that game on Saturday, we get hoops starting at noon Eastern Time on Saturday, which I absolutely love. I'm like, let's get basketball going as early as we can on the weekend. Villanova heads to Creighton at noon Eastern Time. This game is airing on Fox to be able to watch. Lisa, what are you looking at?
Yeah, this is a really big game for both sides. I think for Creighton, they have to kind of maintain, right, coast towards the end of the season because of how they were able to play against UConn. They are going to be gunning for Villanova at this point. Now, meanwhile, Villanova, they play on Wednesday, so the day that this comes out today, against Providence, which when I talked to head coach Denise Dillon, of course, she's just focused on the game in front of her, which is Providence. The last time Wildcats played the Friars, it went into overtime, and Villanova ends up losing at the very, very tail end of it, 80-76. So Wildcats hoping to get the better of Providence in this game tonight, and then a really quick turnaround because they're on the road at Creighton, and then they're on the road at UConn. So, I mean, scheduling is tough. It's tough sometimes for these teams.
I never envy my coworkers at the conference who have to do the scheduling because that is tough task. Let's wrap up the weekend talking about speaking of the Huskies. They play on Sunday against DePaul, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. That game airing on CBS SN. And Chloe, you were able to see DePaul in person this past weekend. When you look at this matchup, what intrigues you?
Yeah, so coming into Sunday, UConn and DePaul had kind of a blowout game in the beginning of the season, but Coach Bruno said that they're still looking to find their fullest potential in this DePaul team. And, he kind of said something funny. He was like, this is not a football game where you can put 11 players on offense and take them out and switch for 11 players on defense. We have to find a way to do both with some of these players. And speaking of some of those players, Anaya Peoples is one of them who has had a phenomenal season. She's averaging 18 points per game, 8 rebounds, and nearly 4 assists. But she's also averaging nearly 3 steals. And I was covering their game and looking at that list, she leads the team in all of those categories. And so she is the girl that UConn is going to look to, kind of hold and take care of this weekend on Sunday. And then just for DePaul, you're playing UConn, you're at Wintrust Arena. It gives a chance for Wintrust to kind of have a lot of fans. This is what's good about UConn. They bring fans to the stadiums. They pack the house. And I think DePaul is going to kind of feed off that, And so UConn's going to have to try to find a way to be who they are and do what they did against Creighton, which was, playing basketball in the best way possible by sharing the ball with each other. There was 4 girls in double digits in that starting group, and they're going to have to do just that. But, for both teams, it's going to be exciting. It's on national television. And so I'm looking forward to see how DePaul improves after this loss against Seton Hall, and also how UConn improves against a win against Creighton. I think it's important for teams and coaches to know that you improve just as much off of a win. And so exciting one to watch on Sunday, 5 p.m. Central Time.
Central Time, girl. She's throwing it at our Central girl.
I was like, East Coast, I forget.
It's always so funny whenever we have to, my brain cannot process, honestly, time changes. It just doesn't. So I'm always like, Eastern. But we love our Central Time friends as well. Ladies, as always, this was so fun. Chloe, we are so excited to have you a part of this. The girl is getting in these reps. We love it.
Thank you, guys. I love it. Thank you, guys.
Of course. Let's wrap this thing up, shall we? Be sure to subscribe to In the Bonus by the Big East Conference on your preferred podcast listening platforms such as iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Spotify, Deezer, TuneIn, Radio Public, Pandora, Overcast, Odyssey, Samsung Podcast, Pocket Cast, Player FM, Simplecast, and Apple Podcast, as well as the Big East Conference YouTube page. And make sure to like, share, and review. You can also visit bigeast.com for more conference news and information. We'll see you next week for another episode of In the Bonus.